Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's meeting of the Full Licensing Committee, Wednesday, May 19th to 20. The first one face-to-face. I'm extremely grateful that everybody has managed to be here today. I know there are some sensitivities around COVID, and I'm extremely grateful that everybody has made the effort. We will be as brief as we possibly can today to stop people being in a room where there is still a very small but a potential risk with regard to COVID. So again, you're very welcome and thank you for turning up this morning. So I'll turn to my clerk, Sarah Colwick, and I'll ask her please if she will read housekeeping. Thank you. And if you could also make mention with regard to the use of the microphones for members, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. Please use your microphones when speaking and please turn off your microphone when you are not talking. If a vote is required on any issue, the Democratic Services Officer will call out each board member's name in turn, starting with the Chairman and Vice Chairman. This is for those votes that aren't unanimous. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I've just turned my phone down. I did have it on. I hope everybody else's is down. Just give you a moment if it is, because it will be. It goes off. Thank you. Okay, so now moving on to agenda item 1, apologies. Ms. Colwick, apologies. Thank you.
Apologies received from Councillor Decent and Councillor Farr. Councillor Decent is being substituted by Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. So we go on to the substantive for the meeting, which is the election of chairman. And I would like to ask, please, is there a nomination for the post of chairman? Thank you. May I hear from the floor? Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Is there a seconder, please? Is that you, Councillor Burton? Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. I will so take Councillor Burton's second. Thank you others for your kind offer. So may I please have a show of hands as to whether that is agreeable or not? All those in favour? He put his hand up. Councillor Farquhar, I think you need to make your proposal so we can hear it voiced. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to propose yourself, Chair, Councillor Butt. Since you took over the chair of the Licensing Committee, your performance has been exemplary. Your work ethic is beyond question. I've had a look back through the minutes of the previous subcommittee panels, and of the 11 or so going back till September, you've chaired every single one. So I think there is without question your work ethic, and I'm more than happy to propose yourself as chair for this coming municipal year.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Farquhar, for those kind words. I certainly wasn't expecting those, but thank you so much. Did you need Councillor Burton to second voice-wise? And I now need Councillor Burton to second in voice. Thank you, Councillor Burton.
Thank you. I'm quite happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a formal proposal and a formal seconder. Could I please have hands as to those who would support that? We do indeed. Oh, of course, of course. Goodness me. Jumping the gun here. What? Okay, ladies and gents. Are there any other nominations, please, for the position of chair? None from the floor? Okay, right. Okay, I will now go to the vote. May I please have a show of hands of those in favour of nomination? Thank you. That is carried. It is unanimously carried. Thank you very much. My apologies for the hand waving. We now move on to the election of vice chairman, and I would like to propose Councillor Mrs. Julie Bagwell. May I please have a seconder?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second that motion, please.
Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. Well, as we are allowed to, Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations. I'd like to propose Councillor Flagg, if you please.
Okay, I didn't, that's fine. I hadn't quite got to the second nominations there, Councillor Farquhar. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So we have a second nomination. Do we have a second of a Councillor Flagg, please? Oh, Councillor Burton. Sorry, Councillor Brown. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have two nominations from the floor for the position of Vice Chairman. So we now need to go to the election body with regard to voting. So that will appear on your phone or device. So we'll need to ask Richard. Richard is here for us. Thank you, Richard. Richard, we have two nominations for the position of Vice Chair. So they are Councillor Mrs. Julie Bagwell and Councillor. So could we please set up Councillor Farquhar?
If I may, Chair, I'd like to just say a few words in support of my nomination of Councillor Flagg.
You are more than welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Councillor Flagg, as many members are aware, was the chair of the licensing committee with the inception of the BCP. He carried the committee through some very difficult times, and I had the honour of being his vice chairman for those first two terms, and I found that as with your own work ethic, is that we had a very good balancing act as regards those the duties required to either chair a sub-panel committee, either in our capacity as the chair of the licensing committee or as the vice chair. Councillor Flagg brought a tremendous amount to the licensing committee, and I would like to see him continue in another role of vice chairman, the members of the licensing committee.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Councillor Brown, as we are here, would you like to say anything with regard to seconding Councillor Flagg?
No, just I'm content to second Councillor Flagg. He's got a lot of experience on licensing, and I just agree exactly with what Councillor Farquhar has just said.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Well, you have me at a disadvantage because back in the good old days, or the bad old days, or back in the day in Poole, we didn't have a presentation with regards to saying anything about the individual. It would just be a name. But as we have the opportunity to say something about the individual, I'd like to take a few moments just to say something about Councillor Bagwell. Councillor Bagwell and I have worked together over many, many years in licensing as a duo. And Councillor Bagwell has always been a tremendous support to me, reading a lot of background papers at home, pointing out facets that I would need to know, being my researcher, being there on the day very much to take me and assist me in the meeting. So I'd be very, very pleased to be able to continue that relationship with that partnership with Councillor Bagwell. And thank you very much for all your hard work, Councillor Bagwell. So Councillor Kelsey, I don't know if you would like to say a few words for second or just to support. Thank you.
No, I think you took most of the words that I was going to say anyway. You had Councillor Butt. I think, yeah, I'd very much like to support Julie. She's done a good job so far, so she should carry on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelsey. So I think everybody's had an opportunity to put forward their own nominees that both have great assets and a lot to bring to us. So now we will go to the vote. Richard, if you're ready to, I believe it'll be on the phone, yes? And Max will pause the live stream. Thank you. Thank you. And we've taken the vote, and I will refer to our tech returns. Please, could you advise us of the outcome? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have the results of the election of Vice Chairman for the Licensing Committee 2021 to 22. The results are as follows. Councillor Julie Bagwell, 8 votes. Councillor David Flagg, 5 votes. There were no abstentions. Councillor Bagwell is Vice Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, members. Commiserations to Councillor Flagg. Councillor Flagg is an extremely valued member of this committee, and I know that he will continue his endeavours to assist and do his very best with regard to the work. Thank you very much for your the nomination from you. Thank you, George and Councillor Brown. Okay, then. So moving on, and congratulations to you, Councillor Bagwell. Moving on, then we move on to any declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in the room? If there are, could you raise your hand and state them? There are none then, thank you. And moving on to the confirmation of the minutes. Now, the confirmation of one set of minutes came in the supplementary, which we were sent last night, I believe. I'll indicate that you accept the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of April and 21st of April. They were circulated, the supplementary document, and licensing subcommittees held on the 15th of April and the 29th of April. This is 2021. Are we all agreed? We are. Can we have a show of hands, please? Also agreed. That's unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. We move on now to public issues. We had a very late submission with regard to a public issue, which actually went to an overview and scrutiny board, I believe, but it was deemed to be more relevant to licensing. So I'm going to read out the statement, and once the statement is read out, I will ask the officers to deal with it accordingly and advise the applicant with regard to her statement stroke question. Is everybody content with that? Thank you. So this came from a lady by the name of Susan Stockwell, and she writes, could the legal identity of any application for a licence of any sort for premises to BCP be included, as well as evidence that the individual or company is legally able to control the premises, e.g. entry from the land registry, lease or commercial licence? In the case of a company, a named director should apply with an entry from company's house. The identity could then be verified through, e.g. passport, driving licence, etc., in the usual way for anything involving property. The current practice of allowing trading names only to be stated is not satisfactory. So that boils down to the trading names on an application. This individual doesn't feel that's satisfactory. So I think I'll refer to our legal advisor, Mrs. Cole. Mrs. Cole, will you be able to deal with this and answer the applicant accordingly?
Yeah, we will.
We'll delegate that to you then.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you very much. Are members happy? Yes? Okay, thank you very much. So we move on then to agenda item 8, which you'll have on your screens. I'll just arrow up. Okay, thank you. So agenda item 8, which is the harmonisation of taxi and private hire licensing fees for BCP Council. And you will see they run from pages 17 to 26, which might be useful later. And Nananka Randall, who is our licensing manager, is going to present the report. Thank you, Nananka.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, basically it's a harmonisation of the fees. We've currently got 3 different sets of fees across the BCP area for applicants for driver licences, vehicles. And now that we're one and we're having one policy, we need one set of fees. Proposed fees were brought to committee on the 4th of March and the fees were agreed. But to meet the legislative requirements of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, section 70, because the fees for vehicles and operators is in excess of £25, bearing in mind the legislation is from 1976, we had the duty to publish the fees in a paper and allow anyone to make an objection. The process was followed. The notice is in the bundle. It went in the Echo, and the fees were published and put in the council buildings for the period of 28 days as required. There were no real formal objections to the proposed fees. What happened on the 4th of March when we were presenting those fees, Kevin Diffie, who is one of our taxi trade representatives from PRC Streamline, had actually submitted an objection to the proposed fees at that time. And because it was too late to bring to the 4th of March, I did advise him that I would bring his objection to this meeting after the 28-day period, which is what I have done today. That's really the report for you. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Nananka. I'll just bring that back just to summarise, if I may. Thank you. Members, these fees were agreed unanimously by us at our meeting of March the 4th. And in order to be equitable, when Nananka brought this late out of time objection to me, I thought it only fair, because of some of the difficulties that we'd face with regard to the taxi trade and some of the sensitivities, that we do bring this objection for people to have a look at. I've broken it down with Nananka's support with the relevance of some of the statements made within it and the questions that are raised within it. So I hope this will be helpful. I will take you through it, and then please, any questions for Nananka. As I said, the fees were agreed, and as Nananka said, Section 20 specifies that the only reason that we would ask for objections is because of that £25 accession on the fee charging. And Mr. Diffie asks us if we'll consider the following points. He's asked, why is licensing asking for any license in their licensing budget? It's not asking for an increase in its licensing budget. That is the straight answer on that. It's down to the Local Government Structural Changes, General Amendment Regulations 218. It provides that the licensing authority has 24 months from the date of reorganisation to prepare and publish fees for the new local government area. So it is a requirement for us to do this. And as Nananka's pointed out, we started at baseline. There were different charges across the board, as we have discussed. Some under Dorset County, where economies of scale allowed for charges to be much less in comparison to Bournemouth and Poole. So a balance had to be found. And they are actually it's cost recovery basis only, I think, is the statement that you use, Nananka, which is useful, because you can only recover the costs that you actually spend. There can be no profit made in that. I hope that's helpful on that point. The creation of the BCP Unitary Authority was supposed to result in greater efficiency in reducing costs. We go back to the fees required to meet the costs of the services and have to be set in accordance with the legislation on the cost recovery basis only. So if the fees are set incorrectly, this can result in a judicial review. And furthermore, the fees as proposed and agreed with us by us on the 4th of March were calculated on a cost recovery basis. And that was in full agreement with our Section 151 officer. It goes on to say about the number of cars, drivers remain the same. This would increase, that it's an unknown entity. The rationale is not to make a profit, to be in cost. Again, it is not about making a profit. We would like the council the last 3 years to be taken into consideration to establish what the money has been spent on so that we can compare it with the future spending plans. I would like to refer to you, if I may, Nananka, because I know you went to great efforts under the Freedom of Information Act to provide this, and any comments you might have with regard to that point. Thank you.
Yes, I can confirm that the trade have been provided with the accounts from the last 3 years for the 3 councils, and the forecast for the further year. This is quite a difficult period. We are in the beginning of a new policy, the beginning of a new counting period, really. So we don't know what the fees will look like in 12 months, and if there is any excess, then we can adjust the fees accordingly. But this is not a case of what the number of drivers and the number of vehicles, that's how much money you get in. Drivers' licenses are over 3 years, operators' licenses are over 5 years. So, the accounting is quite complicated because you have to obviously move some of that money across as forecasted income for other years. It's not just everything is put on for this year, but our accountant has gone through it and he is content that we do not have a huge overrun.
Thank you, Nananka. Yes, it's a very movable feast, and thank you for that clarity. Mr. Diffie goes on to say that the drivers have suffered very badly through COVID-19 pandemic and are unable to meet any extra costs. And I know that we will all feel great empathy for Mr. Diffie and the trade, because regrettably, although the committee will empathise with the difficulties faced by all trades during COVID, profit and loss of any business is not a consideration of this committee and is not provided for in law or in the policy. So that matter is not something which sadly we can consider, but I know we do empathise with Mr. Diffie over that. Last year, the Licensing Committee approved an increase in the fare chart, which licensing have not yet been able to implement, meaning that we're losing income on every one of the very small number of fares that we do ask. Well, this is very much in part to some of the delays which we suffered with regard to putting the taxi policy into play, and that comes into play on June the 1st. So we are where we are on that one. We did have to deal with a lot of issues with regard and were delayed very much by the taxi trade itself. So that's the position we have. On the 1st of June, the new fees will apply. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Nananka.
Sorry, if I just jump in there quickly. Yes, we did agree an increase in the fares for the taxi that they could charge. At the request of the trade last year, that was not put into place because they felt with COVID it wasn't a good time. However, that has been put in place. The arrangements are in place to start. It was at the beginning of May. Okay, so they have now had that fare increase for the.
So it was the 1st of May, not the 1st of June.
Well, the policy is in the 1st of June. Yes. But the increase that we had agreed last year has now come into force for them, and new fare charts have been provided for that.
Okay, so in fact, that statement from Mr. Diffie was informed of himself, because he writes to say that they are not in training, and actually at the time of writing the statement they were. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, I hope that's clear, members. But the policy actually is for June the 1st with regard to that. Goes on to say taxis will be in 3 zones and earning potential is very difficult in each one, particularly at night, but this has not been taken into consideration. Again, this policy is for the licensing of private hire and hackney carriage and BCP, and the very point of this policy is to harmonise fees across the new authority, not to have different charges in each zone. So that statement really doesn't have any relevance to it. He goes on to say, I think they should remain as they are until we have equal opportunities across the BCP area. So having said that, and having my overall view with some support and advice from the officers, members open to your questions, anything that you'd like to ask or anything you'd like to state. Anybody like to speak, or are we content? Councillor Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for providing those answers to Mr. Diffie's questions, because when I read through and read his letter, you know, he raises some good points. So I'm glad that you've sort of gone through them in order. A couple of questions. It was mentioned about, obviously, the early stages of BCP, new policy, so it's difficult setting the taxi licensing budget and, you know, knowing where the outturn will be. If there is a surplus because of efficiencies within BCP, if there is a surplus on the taxi licensing budget, how is that handled and reallocated in the future? Is it a case of, OK, we'll hold the surplus on the books and then we freeze the fees until that's exhausted, or would we reduce the fees? Just a little bit of understanding about how any surplus on the taxi licensing budget is handled.
Thank you. Yes, it's good to have perhaps some further clarity on that, Councillor Brown. Thank you for your question. And Nananka, I'll hand to you for the answer. Thank you.
Yes, if there is any surplus, what we would then do is adjust the fees accordingly down to then get rid of any surplus, just as we would if there was any deficit, we would have to then increase them. But I think what we would look at is do 3 years. I think that's what the accountant would sort of recommend, because that's the period for the drivers, which is where the bulk of the you know, we've got more drivers than anything else really, and that way we'll then be in a good position to know what we're looking at, and then we can do an adjustment accordingly.
Are you content with that answer, Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did have one other question as well.
Yes, of course, carry on.
Raise. I know Mr. Diffie says about the difficult time they've had during the pandemic. It's affected all the taxi drivers. And funny enough, in my other work, I was actually speaking to a taxi driver yesterday about his struggles in operating. And I take the point that he says here about the struggle to afford additional costs. I'm trying to understand what national government may have done for taxi drivers in this situation. I'm aware, obviously, of public transport and subsidies for bus companies, etc., but I don't know whether officers know whether there's been any government support or grant support for taxi drivers, or whether it is just through, as self-employed people, whether they've been able to access supplementary payments from HMRC under the sort of self-employed COVID sort of provisions. Yeah, I don't know if officers can clarify what provision there has been at a national government level for taxi drivers to get through this period.
Well, I'm content to have that question answered. I don't think it's got an incredible relevance with regard to this, but I think for the interests of the committee, David, Councillor Brown, to perhaps advise us. I know there were available grants from BCP, but these were somewhat difficult to access and time had run out, etc., etc. But I'll hand to Nananka to iterate that. Thank you.
Yes, there were additional funds available through the business development team, the ARG stream. The addition, can't remember what it's called now though, what the acronym is, ARG anyway, which are additional payments in addition to the self-employed. And stream 2, which was in January, was specifically for public drivers, transportation, and we had a lot of people, well, a number of taxi drivers applied then. And then there's a new stream 3 currently, and we've had a lot more taxi drivers. We've had about 300 drivers apply for that. We're confirming, you know, those drivers' details with the business people so that the payments can be made. So that there is available funding, and obviously the trade are aware of that.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. It's a useful question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation.
Councillor Kelsey, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I know that we don't like increases and things, and nobody does, but actually, if any one driver was to take advantage of every single price that was on here, they'd find that the actual increase they will be paying is £1.96 per week. That would be the actual increase if they actually did everything on here that was required. So it's not a vast increase. There's quite a few reductions as well, and it's nothing different to what we've done over the last 14 years that I've been doing this work. So I'll quite happily move the recommendations that we accept these price increases, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelsey. One moment, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to second that.
Okay, you're right. Okay, so stealing my thunder as usual. So just to summarise then, thank you very much, members. We do have a motion to move, but I will just summarise on thoughts. David raised, Councillor Brown raised 2 issues which I think were quite important, and we had a satisfactory answer to those with regard to if there is too much money brought in, as to what happens to it, and also as to grants which were available for the trade. So, and I hope that my explanation was helpful with regard to answering some of the questions. So I think that the objections have been materially considered and were fully explored, I believe, at the meeting of March the 4th, and further fully explored today. And I don't feel, and I think perhaps that the committee don't feel, that the objections raise any new matters that would alter the unanimous decision of this committee on the 4th of March. So the proposal is that the fees be set as agreed at the chart at Appendix 1. So we have a proposer and seconder. So members, all those in favour, could you please show? Thank you. There are none against. Thank you. There aren't. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. So that goes through unanimously. So moving on then to the next item, and that is the sector establishment policy. Just give ourselves time just to find our reports, and we're having to do this all on screen. Okay, thank you. Yes, indeed, thank you. It is page 27. That's very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. So, Councillor Brown, thank you.
Apologies, Chair. If I could just leave the meeting shortly. I've got an urgent call from a hospital.
Yes, of course, of course. Just come back when you're ready, Councillor Brown. Okay, thank you. Okay then, members, so moving on, agenda item 9, the sector establishment policy update, and that is, as Councillor Kelsey so rightly advises us, pages 27 to 118. So I'll ask our licensing manager, Nananka Randall, to present the report. Thank you, Nananka.
Thank you. This is a as an update for members. The draft policy for BCP was agreed by members on the 10th of December 2020, and the policy went out for public consultation during January. From that consultation, there was quite a number of responses, 206 responses in total, and as such, on the 4th of March, members agreed that due to the sensitivity of the policy and the large number of responses, that we would have a working group of 5 members to review the policy, review the comments received, and to find a way forward for the policy. The working party group met on the 29th of March, and I attached the meeting minutes to the report at Appendix 3. That working group included members, myself, legal representative, and Sam Johnson from our equalities team as well, so that everything with regard to the policy and the sensitivities around that were discussed. Members did discuss fully the consultation responses that we received, and particularly we went through everyone that was received from Julia Palmer, who was one of the legal representatives for Your Eyes Only, which is one of the venues currently licensed. And from that working group, amendments to the policy were suggested, as well as updates on the equalities impact needs assessment that is being done alongside the process of creating the policy. Workshop members were aware of the strength of feeling with regard to the topic, and as such, sort of the way forward that's proposed with this policy is for you to consider the amendments as proposed within the version 2 of the policy. The main change, really, or the main addition, is sort of grandfather rights being given to the existing venues, which we have 3 lap dancing sexual entertainment venues and 3 sex shops as existing, and there were some tweaks and amendments to the conditions for premises, which I've highlighted in version 2 in yellow within the documents. Members have suggesting that we go out for further public consultation, and sort of we're asking, I know Councillor Butt is sort of suggesting that we ask more pertinent questions with regard to the policy, to gather maybe slightly more relevant feedback, and certainly if any members can suggest questions for the consultation team, that would be excellent. We were suggesting a 6-week consultation, and we're also suggesting a full member briefing be provided on this policy, because of the sensitivities. We recognise that it can be quite difficult for people, but we obviously have to meet the legislation, and we can't let moral objections affect our legal duty with regard to this policy. But obviously there is a strength of feeling there that we need to recognise and work with, and we then suggest obviously a further workshop with the members to look at any further feedback that we receive, consultation, and then the proposal would be to bring the final version, as it were, hopefully back to committee in September, with the view to have ratification by full council in November. So that's sort of the proposal for the workshop and the forward plan as we move forward.
Thank you, Nananka. Yes, it was quite a lot. It was quite a lot. Yes, the working party did meet, and we did pull apart some of the discrepancies that sat around item 10, number 10, which is on page, is it 92? Page 92, yeah. Where we had some clashes and we were sort of repeating ourselves, and we felt that this was much more streamlined. Nananka, I'll ask you to take us through it with regard to reference, please, and as to its application, so that members are completely clear. So that's at 10. If you could take us through in the highlighted yellow, you can find your place. Has everybody got their place? It's page 92, brightly highlighted in yellow.
Yes, this so the new chapter 10 actually relates now to existing licensed premises. So it reads, it is acknowledged that there are currently 3 licensed sexual entertainment venues within the Old Christchurch Road and the Elverton Road areas of Bournemouth Town Centre, and these are listed as For Your Eyes Only, Wiggle and Spearmint Rhino, and that these venues have been licensed for a number of years. There are currently 3 licensed sex shops in the Bournemouth area, 2 on Holdenhurst Road and 1 in the Triangle. The locations of these existing venues have previously been determined by Bournemouth Borough Council as appropriate for this number of venues. And however, the character of the locality in which some of the venues are situated has changed in more recent years, and more residential student accommodation is available. Any new applications will be considered in accordance with section 11 of this new policy, which details the character and locality of licensed premises. It's determined that these existing licenses will continue to be renewed on application by the existing operators during the lifetime of this policy. So obviously, if the operators changed, then we would consider them as a new applicant, and they would come under the, we would then look at the character and locality of the licensed premises and all of the listed characteristics as contained in Chapter 11. And if there are any objections to any of the renewals, then they would then be referred to the licensing committee for consideration. So that is a very new bit. And then we move then down to the character of the locality, as stated. The feedback, and you will see the consultation report that's attached, mainly was quite positive with regard to the listed characteristics. I think they pretty much cover a lot of our authority area anyway. I'm pretty covered there, and the feedback was quite positive, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very positive. Okay, then, members, thank you very much for that explanation. As this is forms a substantive of the changes, members, are there any questions or points of clarification of fact? Thank you, Councillor Farquhar, and then Councillor Dove. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. It's obvious to me by reading the document which is just referred to there, the amount of work that the working party put into defining this, so it's very clear. And my thanks to the working party for that amount of work, because it does acknowledge the consultation and the existing rights and the legislation. I'd just like to say that I will be abstaining on this particular matter for reasons which I've stated at another time, but I wanted to voice my thanks to the working party on bringing this policy to the licensing committee.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar, and your abstention is completely understood by the chairman, because you have explained that previously. Thank you very much for those words, those kind words. Councillor Dove, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to reiterate again what Councillor Farquhar has said in terms of the amount of work that's gone on, and I thank the officers very much for the breakdown in the views that people have put forward. My concern around the consultation, because Mr. Nanker and Randall did ask for some feedback, please, is that we don't differentiate when people are consulted with what it is that what their individual opinions are regarding these three different venues that we are looking at. And they're very different businesses, and they operate in very different ways, and the services, if I can call it that, that they offer are very, very different. So I would like to perhaps in the next round of consultation, perhaps get people's views, but break their views down into those three different areas. I'd also like, please, if we could, understand the opinions of those working within those environments, particularly within the sexual entertainment venues, if that's okay, please. I've read a lot about this, and I've read a lot about people's opinions on this as to how these girls must be feeling working within these venues. But within our consultation, I don't see their opinions in this, and that's not criticism of you. That opinion is out there in the general world, but I'd just like to make sure that we do include it within our consultation, so it's relevant for Bournemouth and Christchurch and Poole, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. I think I can answer that. This was one of the things in the working party that you were with us, and you were extremely helpful. And thank you so much for bringing Sam Johnson along. That was really invaluable. Yes, it was clear that the first set of consultation wasn't really relevant to the case in point. And we do have three individual businesses per se. They do have very different offers. And I think it would be quite right that questions are set which differentiate between these. And I think that was certainly something which the working party wanted to iterate and take forward. And the opinions of I believe they're called sex workers, the opinions of the sex workers are in very valuable. And I believe, Nanka, that you've been doing some work there. Could I refer to you with regard to that? Thank you.
Yes, I can confirm that we have actually made contact with all of the venues, and they have now been providing us with statements by the people that work within them, and that will be ready for the next round of workshop. But so far, yeah, we've actually received a really good response from people that work in the venues, so we'll get a much more balanced view.
May I thank the officers therefore for preempting what I was going to say and for carrying that out. Thank you.
And thank you for your help and work, Bobby, in the working party. It was invaluable. Thank you very much for bringing along your equalities arm there. Extremely very helpful. So, members, if we are content with number 10 and its changes, we will just go forward. The next set of changes are a little along the way, and you will find them at page, I've just pipped past them, you will find them at page, I think it's 104. This is, there are small little changes with regard to ratios on timings. Is that not correct, Nananka? This is with regard to CCTV. Item 30, which says the licence holder to obtain recordings for 31 days. I think that might have been actually a typographical error, which was put right.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
But we do want to be precise in our policy. And the code of conduct for dancers, there were some quite radical requirements there for change that we wanted to put in place. If you'd like to take us through those, thank you. That's code of conduct for dancers. That's number 48, and that's page 106 or 5, page 105. Thank you, Nananka.
Thank you. Yes, you can see there's quite significant additions have been made here. So dancers shall only perform on the stages to a seated audience or in any other such areas of the licensed premises as may be agreed in writing with the council. Dancers may not accept any telephone number, email address or contact information from any customer except in the form of a business card, which must be surrendered to the licensee or their representative before leaving the premises. Dancers may not permit a customer to touch them during the performance. Dancers must not, when performing, intentionally touch a customer at any time during the performance unless accidentally or due to a third party or for the purpose of restraint. And for the avoidance of doubt, if a performer has to intentionally touch a customer for the purpose of restraint, the touch should only be made above the customer's chest or on their limbs or with the performer's hands. Dancers may not straddle the customer. And if a customer attempts to touch or speak to a dancer inappropriately, the dancer must stop the performance and advise the customer of the rules of code of conduct.
Thank you.
They're the main highlighted bits in yellow, yes.
We felt it was the working party felt it's very important, and I'm sure that you would support us in that we were quite clear as to what could and could not happen with regard to the protection of the dancers themselves, and also so that the operator would be in no uncertain terms understand what was required of him with regard to the dancers who were performing on his premise. So are there any questions with regard to this or points of clarification or fact, or are we content? Thank you very much. So we'll then continue to the next page. Sorry, Mrs. Cole, yes.
Sorry, I've got the benefit of having printed this out, so it's clearer for me. I think I've got the benefit of having printed this out.
Yes, we're all on screen.
I know. I think we've skipped past a couple of changes.
Did we skip past some changes?
To bring your attention
sorry.
to go back.
Yes, bring us back. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got advertising premises and appearance and layout. Yes, I did skip that one. Is that the one?
Page 102, I think you need to go back to.
Licence must ensure suitable number of trained staff. Yeah, okay, thank you. That's very useful. So having skipped past two extremely important parts, let's pop back to those. So that is page, we've got some overlay here, but it's page 102 and it's items 7 and 8. I think they're self-explanatory. It's licensee must ensure that a suitable number of trained staff are employed to supervise the interior of the premises, floor supervisors, whilst performances are given under this licence. That wasn't clear in the last policy. And 8, the licensee must ensure that a sufficient number of floor supervisors are employed in the premise to supervise customers and performers whilst sexual entertainment is provided. So it's a quid pro quo, also for the performers and the customers. I think that's quite clear. Unless there's any questions of fact or clarity. Okay, thank you very much for pointing that out, Linda. So we'll now go on to the next one, which is advertising premises, appearance and layout. Again, fairly mandatory, but needed to be stated at 19. There should be no touting for business in any area outside of the premises there's a typo, but not limited to but not limited to persons holding advertising boards, leaflet advertising on branded vehicles or personal solicitation. So that's down to the solicitation of business outside the premises, which again needed to be materially stated. Are we all content? Are there any questions, points of clarity or fact? No. Okay, so then we go back to go past the dancers. There are 2 more points with regards to the conduct for dancers, but I think that Nananka covered all of those. So moving on to the next item, which is item 64. And this is what was around, we did have some debate over this, closed doors or closed curtains. So it may be that members would want some clarity on this because the working party certainly did. All booths stroke areas for VIPs used for private dancers must be visible to supervision and must not have closed doors or closed curtains that prevent performances from being observed, obviously for the safety of the dancer. Nananka, I think I'll hand to you do you remember what we discussed at the time as to obviously we can see why this is important for the safety of the dancers, but it was just a point of perhaps clarifying the fact that this needed to be done. Would you perhaps agree with that?
Yeah, I think because they have floor supervisors that are watching the floor, as it were, so you can't have these booths closed in so that there's no observation and safety for the performers.
Is that understood, members? Because the working party did take a little time to get our head around that one. So
it did take a while.
Yeah, we did drill down into it to make sure we understood. So we're all happy then. We're all content. Okay then. So thank you for that, Nananka. So moving on, I think we come up then to the end of the changes. So those are the changes in their entirety. Unless we've missed any, Mrs. Cole, that you want to point out on the screen? No, thank you. And thank you for drawing our attention to that. So thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Hi, we've missed one on page, I've lost it now.
No, it's like
page 104. Licence holder shall retain recordings for 31 days. That was also highlighted.
Oh, I did actually refer to that.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I did refer to it. It was just it said 28 days, and I think we had to put 31. I did refer to it.
Sorry,
so it's okay. We've got clarification now because we've made sure we've mentioned it twice. So we're clear on that. Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. So, members, are there any other questions or points of fact that you'd like to raise, or are we content that those amendments stand as printed? We are. Okay, so if we move back to our recommendation. So the recommendation sits that members consider the proposed fee. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Moving on. Wouldn't happen if I had paper. Goodness me. Right, okay. This is the recommendation that members consider options for further public consultation. We've heard from Nananka. I will just iterate over that. It was thought prudent that all members understand this sensitive area. So we are planning to have a member seminar people can raise questions and advise on the outcome of the second consultation. And because this version 2 differs so significantly from version 1, we feel it's important to go out to consultation again. I hope members are content with that. We've heard from Councillor Dove with how that consultation must ensure that we cover those 3 separate premises, as they all do have a different offer, and that we do consider take information and contributions from the sex workers, which is very, very important. And that we are asking the right questions. So those questions, members, if there's anything in there that you think should be raised, I'm sure Councillor Dove will be helping us in that. Please could you ensure that our clerk has sent those? Are you happy to receive those, Mrs. Carter? Thank you. And the finished item will be decided as to questions once you sent them in. The Vice Chair and myself will sit down with Nananka and legal advice and make sure that that consultation is appropriate. We will, of course, be asking the advice of Mr. Johnson, Sam Johnson, and I believe that it might be prudent to ask Councillor Dove if she'd also assist in that because of her equalities arm. I think that would be useful. Are members content? They are indeed, right. Okay, so with that said then, we have no further amendments to the policy, but we've made sure that we're happy. So we will take forward that process. Is everybody happy with that? I so propose. Could I have a seconder, please?
I second.
Thank you, Councillor Bagwell. Could I have a show of hands that we're happy that we continue in that vein? And thank you. So that's everybody in favour and anybody against? No, and an abstention. 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on then to our last item, which is our forward.
Sorry to cut in, Chair.
Sorry,
I do apologise. I was a bit slow on the mark. Can I have my abstention recorded for the minutes?
Of course you may. Yes, of course you may. I think we'll take that as read that of any abstentions that come from Councillor Farquhar. Councillor Farquhar likes his matters recorded, so if we could take that as a standard. Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Farquhar?
Very kind, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So moving on then to our last item, which is our committee's forward plan. Today we've had the harmonisation of fees and the update on the BCP sex establishment policy. We move on then to the trial of licensing members for 2 reserves for our subcommittees. This has been extremely successful, and Councillor Burton will out that he came, bless him, to a subcommittee with his tie off. This is before we started, and realised, bless him, to his horror, that being the second reserve, he needed to put his tie on and he needed to join us. And indeed he did. He was well prepared and we had a good meeting. So I believe having, as Councillor Farquhar iterated, having attended all 11 of those subcommittees that we've heard as chair, I do find that having that extra reserve really helps. So I would like to propose, and I'd like a seconder, that we do continue this and we actually put it on as our standard policy now that we hold 2 reserves. I have a seconder, or did you want to speak?
Yeah, no, just say I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. So I have it seconded. So formally proposed and seconded. Thank you for all those hands going up for seconding, much appreciated. Could I have a show of hands that we now invoke that in our policy? And we're unanimous. Thank you very much. So going on to the draft gambling policy, this is on the agenda for the 16th of September. It's quite a big piece of work, so we will need to knuckle down with regard to that. Nananka, I don't know if you want to give us a brief overview as to that piece of work and how it might pan out. Thank you. I said brief.
Slightly hysterical laughter. I hear the word policy one more time, I mean. Yes, so that will be our new BCP gambling policy. In some ways it will be slightly easier because it's very prescribed by the Gambling Commission what should and should not be contained within the policy. So hopefully it won't be as open to interpretation as maybe some of the other policies that we've been dealing with. And yeah, so
yes.
Thank you.
It is quite finite. It's quite finite, set in law. Opinion and conjecture hopefully and don't come into it.
We make sure that it's within the national timings, which is why it's been put off so that it will come in 22 in line with all the other local authority ones.
Yes. Thank you very much, Nananka. That's extremely helpful. So we have, as we've previously discussed, we have our BCP sex establishment policy will be returning to us on the 16th of September, and hopefully all the things that we've discussed today will have been put in train and those outcomes will be able to be discussed. And we've kept on the agenda the update on taxi and private hire policies. So if anybody is wishing us to further debate that, we can. We've not heard anything, so we will take that as read that we have ended it and there's been no issue to raise. So with that in mind then, Nananka, thank you. Sorry, it's very difficult. I can't see how you're there.
It's a lot easier online because you can see the little hands come up. Just to say on the taxi and private hire policies, we were keeping it on the forward plan for feedback and tweaks to the policy. You know, it is implementation of a whole new policy, and there are a few things that are coming to light that maybe we just have to tweak, which we are doing as we implement it. But obviously, it's bits that I think the trade will probably want committee to consider, and we have advised them that in December we'll bring it back, and we are compiling a list of feedback, and there are a few anomalies that I think will need to be looked at. So that's why that's on the floor plan for December.
That's very helpful.
Thank you.
And that's what we're here for. If something does need to be amended, then of course we can consider that and amend it accordingly for the trade. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, Councillor Duff.
Thank you. I appreciate that the Constitution Working Group is looking at the attendance and whether all 15 panel members need to be at a hearing where BCP put in their applications. I wondered, is that going on the forward working plan, or is that going to go through a different route, please?
No, that's been taken through the appropriate channels with regard to the Constitution. As chair, I took that to the Constitution Working Party. We have our chairman here, and it was unanimously supported to go back to audit and governance, so that the full meeting of the Licensing Committee were not so required to meet if it was a sex establishment application or a BCP application of itself, because it implied that a subcommittee could not be impartial. It didn't make sense. The Constitution isn't perfect, and there are some issues around there, drafting errors, etc., etc. So it was taken back to A&G. They again discussed it in full. I presented my case again on behalf of the committee, and they unanimously agreed to take it to council, which will be on the 22nd now, Councillor Dove, for everybody to hopefully be able to support, so that we can go back to our subcommittees, which are working extremely well. And just to say, if we've got to pull a full committee hearing for some applications, I've had, as Councillor Farquhar has iterated, to 11. I have 2 next week, 2 the following week, and there are 2 hearings on each. So full committee would be extremely busy, and it would not be practical apart from anything else. And it does rather say that if it has to go to full committee, then subcommittee can't be impartial, which was mainly the nub. And the law allows for it, because the law delegates the work of the full licensing committee to the subcommittee, so it is capable of happening. So you'll be assured you will see the full report. But that has gone through 2 channels thus far. I hope that's helpful, Councillor Dove. Okay, so with that said, then we are exactly at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much, members, for your attendance. I look forward to seeing you again at our next meeting. Thank you very much.